Welcome to the Teachers on Fire podcast, where I profile agents of growth and transformation in education today. Each guest shares their highs, their lows, their passions, their goals, and the resources that are shaping their thinking and inspiring their practice. For show notes and links from each episode, visit teachersonfire.net. You can also follow the show at Teachers on Fire on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And of course, please subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm your host, Tim Cavey. Let's meet today's guest. Today, I'm speaking with Jennifer Wolfe. Jennifer is a writer, English and AVID teacher, and that's capital AVID. She's also a Google certified educator, a Hyperdoc fanatic, and a WeVideo ambassador. You can follow Jennifer on Twitter at MamaWolfe22. That's Mama Wolfe with an E at the end, and then the letters TO2, and visit her blog at jenniferwolfe.net. Jennifer, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Are you ready to talk education?
Absolutely. I can't wait.
All right. That's the kind of answer I'm looking for. So let's get started. Why don't you jump in by telling us a little bit more about your current context? What does life look like for you on a daily basis?
Well, sure. And thank you for having me. I am a teacher in Davis, California. Davis is outside of Sacramento, about 60 miles from San Francisco and about 40 miles from Napa Valley. It is the home of UC Davis, the University of California at Davis, which is one of the UC schools. So it is a small-ish college town, about 65,000 people and about 33,000 at the university. So there is a lot of education everywhere in my town. I work at Ralph Waldo Emerson Junior High School in Davis. It's a 7-8-9 school, which is kind of unique to many models these days. It has the ninth graders at our junior highs, and then our sophomore, junior, and seniors go over to our high school. So we have, I teach 7th grade, 8th grade, and 9th grade, English, AVID, reading, and it's an interesting combination. And I also went to that school when I was a middle schooler or junior high schooler. So it's been kind of a full circle experience.
You know, I always love those stories, Jennifer, and I've had a little bit of that myself. I'm not currently at a school that I attended, but I have taught at the one that I attended middle and high school in. And there's something special about that when you can walk down the hall and you're sort of parsing these two different layers of memories, right?
Absolutely. It was a little bit freaky at first when I started there, especially since they had the same carpeting as they did in 1979, which was kind of gross. But since then, both of my children have gone through there, and I was their teacher. That's how I became named Mama Wolfe. That was my daughter trying to figure out what the heck to call her mom, who was also her English and yearbook teacher.
All right. Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So did she call you Mama in class?
Well, she didn't know what to call me. That was the weird thing. She just sort of would look at me with this strange look, but all of her friends were in my class. And so they were uncomfortable calling me Jen or Mrs. Wolfe. So one of the kids just shouted out one day, "Hey, Mama Wolfe." And that stuck. And it's been kind of a nice nickname because I believe so much that's kind of who I am as a teacher is I teach like a mother. I want kids to feel comfortable. I want to build relationships. I want them to trust me. And then when things get hard, they feel like I'm there to support them. So it just all kind of works out.
I really like what you've put together with the Mama Wolfe. You've really run with it. And on your website, you've got the tagline that says, "Loving fiercely, teaching audaciously, and thinking deeply." And I want to come back to that later. That is an awesome, awesome tagline.
Oh, thank you.
But first of all, Jennifer, it is story time. And I think this is so important for other educators to hear about not just the bright moments, but also the challenging times. So would you share with us about a low moment or some kind of an experience of adversity that you faced somewhere in your teaching or education career, and then describe how you overcame it?
Yeah, I've been teaching for 28 years. And, when I think about the adversity, it is, it's like the bittersweet, right? You teach and things are hard and you have challenges just like the kids do. And I actually forget a lot of the low moments, like we do in parenting. But I always believed that when I started teaching, I would teach until it wasn't fun anymore. Because I wasn't the kind of person who knew I wanted to be a teacher. I was an English major. I loved reading and writing and thought I would go in that direction. And then I ended up deciding to take the teaching test and get my credential. And it's just been what I was meant to do. But because of my, I think, philosophy about wanting it to be a fun job, I've quit 3 times. And they're for a variety of reasons. And the last time I came close to quitting was about 7 or 8 years ago. And I would say it is a moment that stuck with me because it lasted a long time. I was teaching at my current job in my current school in an almost very similar position. And we live in a community where people really have an intense obsession with education, almost to the point of being detrimental to kids and their mental health. And it's a real tricky balance when you're teaching middle school to want to have kids push themselves and provide rigorous opportunities, and yet also remind them that they are still kids. And so I never really wanted to teach in this community because of that. I thought I would be better off teaching outside of where I lived, outside of where I had gone to school, because it can be such a personal situation. And when things go sideways, it can impact a lot of parts of your life. And one year things did go sideways with a parent. This parent wasn't satisfied with the way I was grading their child, wasn't satisfied with what I was doing, and became kind of obsessed with that, of trying to pick out everything I was doing in my practice, trying to blow things out of proportion and make a big spectacle, coming to school kind of stalkerish, kind of, to the point where I was very uncomfortable with the situation. And what made it so difficult is, we deal with parent conflict. That's part of the teaching process. But what made it really difficult was that I didn't have the kind of administrative support that I really needed to feel confident and safe in my practice. And after this went on for a few months, and every day was very, very stressful because I felt like I never knew what was going to happen. I didn't know how the child was going to react. There were outbursts and all kinds of crazy things. And I felt like I was being scrutinized at a level that was completely uncalled for. And at that point, I had to decide, is this really what I wanted to do? And I ended up taking some time off to reevaluate, and I ended up finishing out the year and feeling really, really defeated, because teaching is, for me, like many people, we do this all the time. We think about, how can I improve it? We reflect, everything I do, I want to do better the next time. And so for me, feeling like there was such intense dissatisfaction by one parent, and then that my administration wasn't backing me up to the point where I felt like I could go in the classroom and be my best self, was really, really upsetting. And I ended up winning Teacher of the Year that year for my school, which was really, really a moment where I thought, this is the bittersweet, right? I went through all of this unnecessary kind of horrible scrutiny of this parent. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but sure. It was really out of control. It was more than just an average parent feeling like their daughter or son should have gotten an A when they were getting a B, that kind of thing. But at that moment, I decided, I can't keep doing this. It's not good for me. It's not good for my children. It's not good for my students. Mm-hmm. And if I want to keep teaching, I have to create the kind of job that is going to lift me up so I can be the right role model and the right person in the classroom for all the other kids. And that's how I've kind of proceeded ever since then, picking positions and pushing myself to always be better. And I think it has just made a world of difference. And that's how I've survived 28 years, going to my 29th year of teaching 7th, 8th, and 9th graders.
Well, your story is hitting close to home for me. I teach eighth graders, and I opened my career in seventh grade, and so I definitely understand the age level. And I think back through the story that you shared, and a couple of things stand out. One, just the fact that you did feel unsupported by admin, and I didn't really hear anything in your story about really being strongly supported by colleagues either. And I think that is key for a teaching professional. If you are under fire, and hey, this is a people business, it's going to happen even to the best of us sometimes, that for whatever reason we draw the ire of students and or parents on occasion, but we cannot feel like we are alone.
Right.
We cannot feel completely isolated in those moments.
No, it was particularly tough with my colleagues because this parent had a reputation for sort of singling out a child every year, singling out a teacher every year.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was well known that it wasn't a surprise to people that this was happening. And yet other colleagues were not. I did have one colleague who really stood up for me and got in some confrontational situations with the parent in my support. But it's hard because people are having that kind of feelings and that kind of intensity is hard for colleagues to have to deal with too.
Mm-hmm.
But it did really leave me feeling like I needed to really think about how vulnerable was I going to be in the classroom, and how was I going to handle a situation in the future if it were to happen. But being voted teacher of the year for that year, and then having actually that administrator leave that following year was enough to make me feel somewhat vindicated, and
Sure.
that the situation didn't have to go the way that it did.
Well, I love that bounce back. I mean, what an amazing bounce back. Really, it couldn't have been any better. Couldn't have been written any better. And so I like that part of the story as well. I think that's really important. And I love what you said about I'm going to teach as long as it's still fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes I do hear stories of teachers who maybe it hasn't been fun for over 10 years.
Yeah.
And they really need to ask that question about, this isn't worth the salary or the job. I mean, this is your life. And if you are stuck in kind of a dark place or some kind of a rut, whatever your context might be, it is worth stepping away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is other work out there, and we shouldn't feel like we're stuck in this profession. So it's kind of ironic in a way, because when it comes to teaching salaries, we can't use the phrase golden handcuffs, right? But I do think there are some teachers who do feel like maybe they don't have a ton of options. And so I like that.
Right. And I agree with that, but I also think that we do ourselves a disservice in our profession by not continuing to educate ourselves and to improve ourselves as educators,
mm-hmm.
and to assume that we can have the same practice. I got my credential in 1991, and the world was a vastly different place than it is now.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to continue teaching the way I did in 1991, that's really not, that is not fair to my students. And I'm not going to be preparing them for what they need, because things are different. And I think that we need to focus more on teacher preparedness, teacher professional development, so that we are investing in ourselves and that we feel like we are as valuable as any other profession. And I think,
Well, 100% to that, Jennifer. And really, that's the spirit of the Teachers on Fire podcast. I think anyone listening right now, you've got a certain vested interest in learning and growing and developing as a professional. So thank you so much for listening. And that speaks right to what Jennifer's talking about. We need to have that really a growth mindset, right? To say we're not going to be just passive spectators and wait for the next professional development event to spoon feed something to us. We're going to be active and
mm-hmm.
pursue that growth for ourselves. So I love what you're saying there too. One more thing that I wanted to note is that for anyone listening, if you have had a difficult year and if maybe you've experienced something like what Jennifer just described, another podcast that I want to shout out is from a guy named Jeffrey Frieden, and he's got a podcast called Dear Teacher, Don't Give Up. And his focus really is teachers who have been to the brink, or who have, as you shared, left the profession for some period of time and needed some time to heal and recover or reflect on really what it is that we want to do with our lives. So keep that one in mind. If you are out there and you've had a difficult year, listen to that podcast, listen to Jeffrey's message too, and hopefully that will provide some encouragement. Shifting gears here a little bit, Jennifer, you mentioned in your profile that you're an AVID teacher, #AVID. So this is a term that I'm not very familiar with, and I did a little bit of Googling around to try to learn more about it. From what I can tell, it stands for Advanced Via Individual Determination.
Yes.
So that's a mouthful of a title. So tell us more about the AVID program, and are you a fan of it? Explain why, or why not.
I am a huge fan. I'm a huge fan. I've been in just finishing my 11th year as an AVID educator. And you're right, it does stand for Advancement Via Individual Determination. AVID is a national program. It's in 47 states across the United States, and it's kindergarten through higher ed. And our focus is to create student success through engaging, rigorous, and student-centered environments. Which sounds like a mission for a lot of schools. But what's different about AVID is that we train about 80,000 educators annually. And the kind of professional development that is provided to teachers is not only just learning best practices, but constantly updating and evolving and creating opportunities for kids to have college and career readiness. We talk in education a lot about soft skills and things that kids will need to know how to do when they get out into the college and or career markets. And I think that AVID's focus on promoting a student-centered curriculum, a problem-solving curriculum, and rather than AVID teachers standing up and delivering information, we are creating an inquiry-based classroom. And in that classroom, AVID students take 1 period a day. It's an academic elective, and it is created to support and promote equity so that our upper level classes, our honors or AP or IB classes, all students have access to that, whether or not they come from parent families who have college backgrounds or they have low socioeconomic needs. AVID is a place where kids can get not only academic support, but also the emotional, the social support that will help them be successful. And we are now, AVID is in 7,000 schools around the country. We have 2 million students enrolled in AVID. And by 2025, our goal as a national program is to have 5 million students participating in AVID programs. And not just in an AVID elective class, but using AVID strategies and supports in a school-wide fashion. I mean, really what we want to see is all kids being able to have everything that they need to go forward and be accepted into the college or career of their choice.
Very, very cool. I love everything I'm hearing there about equity and SEL support. And, we forget, or maybe we don't, maybe it is front of mind, but we hear a lot that students are struggling with the different forms of emotional distress and even addictions and anxiety, especially in the upper grades. And so we have to start thinking about building in the supports that meet the needs of our learners today. You mentioned starting off in the early 90s, and that is when I entered the profession as well. And so that was an age of photocopy jams and overhead transparencies and no internet, right?
Exactly.
And so students weren't going to bed with cell phones, and the world looked very different. And so I love these innovative programs that meet students where they are today.
Right. I think AVID has, and for me as an educator, it really transformed the way I saw myself and my practice. And it allowed me to come out of that 90s, early 2000s of the No Child Left Behind kind of mentality of test-based instruction and focusing on the end result at whatever cost, into looking at, okay, well, at what cost to the student, and how are kids able to cope with taking algebra 2 trig and calculus when they can't afford to have a tutor outside of school? How do they compete in a climate where test scores are giving them acceptance into college?
Right.
And it's also teaching them. You mentioned growth mindset earlier. AVID believes that kids need to learn that they might not be great at something right now, but they have every opportunity within that program to become great. And I have just seen such huge transformations in kids, not only, academically, but more importantly to me, in their emotional belief in themselves, and that they can do hard things, that they can push through, and they know that Mama Wolfe is there, and every other AVID teacher is there. That I'm like their mom at school. I see what's happening. I can talk to them about everything from relationships to when they don't pass a test, they come to me first. They see, I have to tell you something. I know you're going to find out. And having that support at school can make all the difference.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. You've got the perfect last name, I have to say. That really that really works. That was meant to be. So Jennifer, I love that you identify as a hyperdoc fanatic. So for the uninitiated, what do we mean by hyperdocs? Well, hyperdocs act as a base for learning materials and activities. At least this is my definition. Kids work from a central location or a doc and access everything they need from the hyperlinks provided there. I cannot call myself a master of hyperdocs myself, okay? But I will say that I find myself embedding more links and more resources in the Google Docs that I'm posting on Classroom all the time. So, Jennifer, tell us a little bit about what hyperdocs look like in your practice. And this might be fun for you to share maybe a favorite hyperdoc activity that really crushes it.
Okay, well, gosh, I have a lot of favorites. You have a good start of a definition of a hyperdoc, but a hyperdoc is more than just a Google Doc with links. That might be what it looks like to someone. It could be on a doc, it could be a slide deck, it could be using a Google site. What a hyperdoc really means to me is a teacher creating a student-centered lesson that is going to inspire creativity and curiosity. Now, you've probably, you've heard Stephen Covey's work, Begin with the End in Mind. And I think so much for me about using hyperdocs is being able to have an idea of where I want my students to go. But in my classroom, I have kids of all different abilities and all different interests and all different motivational levels. So to think that I can come up with a lesson out of a textbook or some kind of, like, you mentioned dittos before in the 90s, that's going to satisfy the needs of all my learners is kind of crazy in this time of that we're living in. So for a hyperdoc allows me as the teacher to think about all the kids in my room and what is going to capture their interest. How am I going to engage their learning in a way that is going to be meaningful to them, and also allow me to move away from a teacher-focused lesson? There is nothing I dislike more than standing in front of my class and delivering information. Right? Because we live in an age when kids have all of that in their pocket. and my students know now that they can Google almost anything and get the answer to it. And especially in AVID, when we're talking about an inquiry-based approach, if a kid can Google when did the Civil War start, that's an easy way to get that access to information. Now, what are you going to do with it? So by creating a hyperdoc, I'm carefully selecting the content that I want the kids to use, almost like breadcrumbs, and trailing it in such a way that I'm inspiring their curiosity. I'm getting them to explore the content at first and engage in it, and then I'm getting them to explain what their learning is. And maybe that's where that kind of direct instruction comes in. But I can blend that with a flipped model, using videos or screencasts that I've created, things that where I am not having to stand up in front and give a lecture on some kind of a standard that I want them to learn. It's really an intentionally built lesson. And when I begin creating a hyperdoc, I'm thinking about what is the end result. So one of my favorite hyperdocs that I've been using, and this year actually I'm using it right now, is a podcasting hyperdoc.
Yay!
Yeah. And when I started podcasting with my kids, it was a way for me to think about, if I want them to be giving information, so if my standard is a report of information or informational writing, I could have them do that in a traditional essay format, but could I also do it in a different way? And if I'm going to have my end product be a podcast, what scaffolds am I going to need to put in along the way? Not just for the content, but also for the tools that they're going to need to learn to be able to effectively communicate. So I really believe in the 4 C's of education and try and build all of those components into a hyperdoc lesson. So it could be a big, long unit like this Kids Take Action podcast unit that we're doing right now, or it could be a smaller hyperdoc where I'm starting with one skill that I want them to explore because I know that that's going to be needed. So for example, in the Kids Take Action podcast, I actually started with a very small hyperdoc on how to take research notes and giving the kids some access to different kinds of note-taking options so that they would be able to explore, what do those look like? What would it be like to take notes in Padlet? What would it be like if I wanted to use a MindMeister kind of mind map drawing? What would it be like if I wanted to use Wakelet to take my notes, or a digital Cornell note format? Knowing that in order to make a good podcast, they had to have good content. So for me, those kinds of design principles are really what allows kids to have a really engaged lesson. And instead of me standing in front of the class, I'm right there with them. I'm next to them exploring how much plastic is there really in the ocean, and what's so exciting. And in my classroom, I've got they probably have a dozen different topics going on right now, and you're hearing kids going, "Oh my gosh, look at this!" And they're sharing this stuff that they're so excited about. And really, that was the launching pad was the hyperdoc. Yes, it has directions on where to do things and how to submit things, but more importantly, it's packaged this whole unit of learning so that I can be what I like to think of as the guide on the ride. So I am in the learning with them and giving them feedback and experiencing that, and then also adjusting as I go.
Moving from the sage on the stage to the guide on the ride. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And, I'd like to come back to the 4 C's as well. Lately, I've been adding a 5th C, and that is curiosity. And it sounds like you're building that into these hyperdocs as well.
Oh, yeah.
Somehow, it's kind of a tricky balancing act that I hear there. And I think we're all trying to hit as teachers. And that is continuing to sort of guide the ship and think about, where do we want our students to end up? What are the critical competencies that they need to develop? But along the way, giving them as much voice and choice and allowing them to steer their learning as much as we can.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have to say you are a phenomenal guest for me personally, because I've done a little bit of student podcasting. I've done 8th grade research strategies, and so much that is overlapping. So this is really fun for me. So let's go a little bit further on that theme. You are also an expert in the area of WeVideo, or you've done some work there. So I want to talk about that briefly.
Sure.
I think I speak for both of us, Jennifer, when I say that we love to see our learners getting creative, making content, remixing content in fun ways to demonstrate understanding. So talk about WeVideo and tell us, do you have a favorite activity that you could share with us from your practice this year?
Sure. Yeah. So WeVideo, there's so many educational technology tools that are available. It can get, we all have gone down the rabbit hole of wanting to try this and try that, and what's going to work best with our equipment in our classroom and the age level and experience level of our students. And I decided last year, my goal was I wanted my kids to podcast. All year long, I was thinking, how am I going to facilitate this? We have Chromebooks, and the district runs WeVideo on them, which I think is the best video platform for Chromebooks. And we ended up using that for our podcast because that's what I had. And that was before I knew about some other different ways that, there's all different kinds of apps for podcasting. But what I really liked about it was that the kids were learning a tool that yes, they were using for podcasting, but they were also learning how they can manipulate that tool for other projects that they might encounter. So I always want my students to think about technology as a way to be able to do something that they couldn't do before without it. Not just typing a Google Doc because they can't write it on paper, but what is this tool really for? It's not just bells and whistles, but it's something to be able to promote their voice or to promote their inquiry into something that they couldn't do before. So I chose WeVideo and I just jumped in. I had a podcast Hyperdoc that I made with the collaboration of some other of my Hyperdoc friends, which is another amazing thing about that community, is that we are not creating Hyperdocs all by ourselves all the time. We're sharing. It's a free community. So I had this podcasting bits and pieces from a couple of my friends, and I added it to WeVideo, and I said, okay, kids, let's do this. I didn't have any equipment. I didn't have any fancy mics. I didn't have any recording booths. And so I went on Pinterest and I like, okay, what are inexpensive recording booths? And I saw this great one with a cardboard box and you cut flaps for it. And so the kids put their Chromebooks inside the cardboard box. Because I was discovering that my students were very self-conscious. We think kids are so comfortable with technology, but they're comfortable with social media, but they're not necessarily comfortable when they're using technology, a new tool that they don't know, that they're going to be assessed on. So they needed to have comfort with the tool itself, but also like comfortable surroundings for that. So I made this box and I cut holes in it. And I took pictures of my kids doing this. You couldn't see their face, of course, because it was buried inside the box. But we were having so much fun and they were so excited about it. And I put it on Twitter. I'm like, oh, look at this recording. We're recording with cardboard boxes. And anyway, a friend of mine, who's become a better friend, Brian Briggs. I don't know if you have ever talked to Brian before, but he's a great edtech merit guy out here in California. He came in and he helped me get set up with some microphones and some milk crates with foam in them so that they were able to feel like they were really recording a podcast. And the first podcast we did were some were great and some were rough, and it was a huge learning curves, and we had so much fun doing it and the kids felt so empowered. And so I started sharing this out with WeVideo because I wanted them to not only see how we were using the tool, but hopefully give me some more support and tips about how I could do this better, because it was so fun, but I knew it needed to be refined. And WeVideo got very excited that we were using it for student podcasts. And so I began collaborating with them and became a WeVideo ambassador and have helped in the WeVideo community, given some of my perspective as an educator and how we've been doing that. This year, now WeVideo has reformatted or enhanced their ability to do video or voice only. And that was part of the struggle the kids had before was, well, I have these video tracks. What do I do with that when I'm only recording audio? So now when we do it this year, we'll have that ability. And that's been kind of neat for me to see how the company will respond to real feedback from teachers in the classroom and what they're doing. Also, what it's done this year is now my current kids, I told them, this is really important. Not only is this topic important because you're sharing the things that you feel strongly that kids can take action about in the world, but we have a platform. We have WeVideo who is willing to showcase, and they did showcase one of my students' podcasts last year, and it got a lot of play. And so the kids are like, whoa,
fun.
People are going to hear this. And it makes them sit up a little straighter and take it a little more seriously. And to me, that is just one of the beautiful things about using technology in the classroom. They couldn't do that before. When we started in the 90s, we couldn't do that.
Right.
We could record something, but we couldn't broadcast it in that way and let other people hear why kids think we should have gun control or what kids think about climate change. And so being able to offer those opportunities is just really, really powerful.
They are authentic learning experiences, and I think they're so valuable and so meaningful because of exactly what you just said. They can connect with real audiences around the world and actually make a difference and actually enter the conversation. And we saw students in Florida after some shootings there get involved in some social issues. And no matter where you stand on those particular issues, it's exciting to see students get involved in the political process and express their voice, right? And actually make an impact in their world.
And we have kids in my classroom who have differing opinions and are going to be doing podcasts on the same topic, but coming up at it from different angles. And the dialogue I hear going on in the classroom is really powerful because just as fast as one kid is citing a statistic, another kid is questioning their source and saying, well, wait. And that kind of learning, just transcends anything you can do in a textbook or on a worksheet.
So this timing is really neat. I did not realize that you are doing the level of podcasting that you are. And in fact, I don't think I was really aware that you are doing podcasting, but last week, I've got these really strong communicators in my class of 28, and I've got about 6 or 8 that in particular, they just love the class discussions and the debates. You know the type I'm talking about. And I pulled them aside and I said, guys, look, we're wrapping up the year. Are you interested in putting out a few episodes of, we might call them deep discussions with grade 8 or 8th grade or whatever we want to call it? But we have this opportunity and I was pretty pleased by the response. So it would be fun for us to listen in on what you are doing. Now you're publishing through WeVideo, is that correct?
Yes, and we also are using Wakelet.
Okay.
And Wakelet is one of my new favorite platforms because it is a way to collect and curate a bunch of, whether it's resources for creating. So it's one of my students' ways of collecting their resource. But I've also used it, like in my AVID classes, just did infomercials and commercials, and it's a way of publishing that way. So we could definitely, I'd love to swap podcasts with you. Because in my Kids Take Action podcast, Hyperdoc, one of the first things they have to do is, well, what is a podcast? And out of my 33 students, only about 3 or 4 7th graders actually listen to podcasts. So in that exploration part of the Hyperdoc, I am linking up to all different sorts of podcasts. And how fun would it be to be able to link to yours so they could see other kid-created podcasts? That would be really cool.
I would love that, Jennifer. We're forming a little partnership here in the course of our conversation. I like that. So I've got one out, and all I've done so far is student reflections after independent reading. And so we call that podcast Great Expectations, GR8. And
cool.
But I recorded and published about 6 episodes there. And my mechanism was similar to yours. I just asked students to use their Chromebook or their laptop to record a voice file of their reflection. And then I asked my students to post on Google Classroom. And then if you are a classroom school, you'll know that every assignment forms its own Google Drive folder.
Right.
And then from that folder, I just import all those voice files into a platform called Anchor.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I just throw it together. And honestly, it's quick enough that I can sort of integrate all of those voice files before I leave for home at the end of the day. And so it's not, and that was a requirement for me. I mean, I can't spend hours and hours on this, but
Right.
I like the way that Anchor sort of lets you pull in individual files and just throw them together. So for anyone out there listening and maybe interested in this business of student podcasting, or maybe thinking about starting it next year, you're hearing from two middle school teachers that have done it successfully, and we'd both be happy to help you along the way. You know, one other student podcast out there that is making a lot of noise is, I believe, from Washington State. It's the award-winning Culture Podcast. Have you heard of that one?
No, I haven't.
That's with a guy named Hans Apple. I hope I'm saying his name correctly. And so his kids are, I think they're a similar age to ours, 8th or 9th graders, I believe. And they are actually interviewing leaders from across the United States, which is really exciting as well. So lots of really cool things happening. Now, before I let you go on this question, Jennifer, I wanted to ask you, is your podcast appearing on podcast platforms?
No, it isn't yet. And that, there's the whole student privacy issue, and my kids are young.
Right.
So I haven't gotten into that part of it yet. That definitely is a goal for me, to be able to set that up at the beginning of the year with the parents,
right,
so that I have permission to be able to publish them. And I think after, at first I just wanted to try it out and see how it's going to work. And now that I can say to my parent and school community, this is what the kids can do. Listen to these samples. This is serious stuff, and it's professional. I think it'll be workable next year.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Well, I'll look forward to that. I would love to subscribe, so keep me posted, please.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Who knows? We might be able to do some collaboration in the future. That would be a lot of fun.
That sure would.
So, Jennifer, your blog features the tagline, "Loving fiercely, teaching audaciously, thinking deeply," as I mentioned earlier. What an awesome combination. I did want to come back to that. So as you look across your PLN and your own practice, what excites you about education today? What are you obsessing about right now? And I don't know if there's a way to connect that with that tagline. It doesn't need to be, I guess, but I think I just really like that tagline. But yeah, but what is it, I guess, that you're thinking deeply about these days?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I am a thinker. I think about I'm one of those overthinkers maybe, but I kind of, I was an English major. I was a reader. I've always been a person who likes to observe and watch and think about what's happening. So really the tagline came about because I started my blog and my website in 2011. And that was, at the beginnings of Google Suite, and how are we going to incorporate technology into the classroom. And I was doing I got in a grant with the U.S. Department of Education to study global learning. I was doing some coursework with them, and then I had an in-country teaching gig in Indonesia. And so I had created this website and another blog for that was more education focused. So my Mama Wolfe blog was more about me as a mother and a writer. And then I had this other one that was more about teaching. And the more I tried to juggle two different blogs, the more I realized this was kind of ridiculous. And really, when I looked at what I was passionate about, it was loving fiercely, whether it was my children, my students, the people I was meeting around the world when I was doing this work, teaching audaciously, which was how I was pushing myself first and foremost to become a better teacher. And certainly at a point in my career where I could have just sat back and coasted on what I had done and my reputation, but I wanted to really push myself into educational technology and what was it going to be like if I was going to be teaching 21st century skills. And the thinking deeply is really all of that wrapped up together. What are we doing as humans in our world to help kids have a chance for success, and having my own children, watching them grow up and thinking about what kind of mother am I being, and what kind of mother do I want to be for them? And what kind of teacher do I want to be? My children, like I said, were in my class, and thinking about how important it was for me for them to have a good education, and that I wanted to be the kind of teacher that I wanted my own children to have. And that's kind of where that has all come from. So that's what excites me about education right now, is really the ability to be able to reach kids on a personal level. My husband's always saying, God, my English teacher never would have X, Y, or Z. She never would have come to my soccer game, or never would have known, or I never would have thought to ask my teacher about something like that. And I think the world has changed, where we can build relationships in education, and we must build relationships. We must have kids trust and feel safe and feel cared for in the classroom. And we must teach audaciously. We must keep pushing ourselves to do better and be better, because we have a lot of challenges in our world that we want to have movement on, and we need to be figuring out what are new ways we can teach these generations to solve the problems and to feel like engaged members of our society. All the things that I do with edtech and writing and professional development and presentations and speaking, that's all what gets me excited, because it's all wrapped up together.
That is fantastic stuff. And I love what you're saying about thinking deeply. Going back to that one, I have to say to any educators out there, another challenge for you. And AJ Giuliani broke open 2019 with a similar challenge. But if you think you're reflecting and thinking critically and analytically about your practice now, but you're not blogging, take it to the next level by starting to write about your practice and look out. I mean, there's nothing for me that really forces that reflection and that critical thinking about your own practice like blogging and then publishing that to learning out. And then you mentioned teaching audaciously and always looking to grow and to develop and to move forward. So let's go with that. How are you looking to take a next step forward in your practice this coming year?
I kind of hit a big goal this year with my AVID work, and I became a national staff developer. Just am starting. I got my first training, and for me, that has been a huge professional goal, because as soon as I started blogging and writing, it opened up this amazing world of people that I never would have met had I not been developing that presence online. And funny story about Lisa Highfill, who is the creator of Hyperdocs. I had seen her present at a Q conference in Palm Springs right when she was very first sharing her idea that she'd come out. Her book hadn't even come out. They were just sharing their idea about Hyperdocs. And I watched her present, and she's a mom. She's my age. And I was listening to her tell her story about loving and teaching. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense to me. And so I started my Hyperdoc obsession. Well, fast forward a few months later, I was presenting at another conference, and I was checking in, and I said my name, and I heard someone say, Mama Wolfe? And I turned around, and there's Lisa Highfill, and she says, I follow your blog. I'm a mom. I love what you write. And I just like, well, when your worlds collide like that, it was so cool. And it made cool. Me, so all of that has helped me with these professional goals of sharing what I know. So I really am excited to be a staff developer with AVID. We're starting a digital teaching strand in all of our professional development. And like I said, there's 80,000 educators getting trained every year. So I am going to be one of the first staff developers in the digital teaching and learning strand, starting nationally this summer. And my big goal is to continue my professional development, teacher training. And I've got some books. I've got 3 books that I'm writing.
Wow.
In various stages. And I'd like to push forward on that. I'm now an empty nester. My son only left for college. Yes, he just finished his freshman year, and my daughter has graduated. So I can see the light at the end of college tuition tunnel.
Yeah.
I'm super excited I've been working on this plan so that by the time he's done with college, I can open up more opportunities for traveling and taking my work in different directions. So that's my sort of professional goal, is to work on my ability as a staff developer and trainer and writer so that I can move forward and keep on working for another couple decades.
Well, that is exciting. And it sounds like work that would really resonate with your heart and your passions. And so I look forward to hearing how that unfolds. That kind of connects with my next question, Jennifer. Let's take it outside of education. What's another area of learning for you? What is it that ignites your passions outside of the classroom and brings you alive as a human being? Tell us why this area interests you and why you enjoy it.
I'm a reader. I'm a huge reader. I challenge myself to read all sorts of books. And that for me has challenged me to not only just read for pleasure, but also read for education. And along with that, writing. So like I shared, I have 3 book outlines that I'm working on, and I'm just needing to have the time and space to be able to say, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing. So I spend a lot of my outside of teaching time writing and reading. I love to travel. I have the benefit of both of my children living in different states, so I get to travel to visit them, but also I love going to different countries. I've worked with a nonprofit in Nicaragua since 2010 and love going down there and working and helping rebuild the education system there. That's been a huge passion of mine. And I have a huge garden. I'm a big gardener. I love flowers and roses and vegetables and all kinds of things. It gets me really to peace out and forget about all the stresses of the day. And I'm a bike rider. I ride my bike to work every single day. So those are my things that I love to do.
That's a good package. Share about a personal habit or maybe a productivity hack that contributes to your success, Jennifer. How do you get it all done on a daily basis?
Well, it never really gets all done, does it? But
Spoken like a true English teacher.
An English teacher, a mom, a human who's just got too many. I'm very curious. I always want to know more. But I really learned as a mom and a teacher to keep good boundaries. I had very high expectations for myself as a teacher when my children were small, but I always wanted to make sure that my children were getting the best of me because that was my first priority. So I learned to keep really good boundaries around work. I learned how to be really organized for the classroom. So I'm a good planner. I've always been pretty organized, but it forced me to always be thinking ahead, not just at the last minute, because as a parent, you never know when your kid's going to get sick or you need to go pick them up somewhere. And I didn't want to feel unprepared for my students either. So good boundaries between work and school, but I also always left school as prepared as I could be, whether it was for the week ahead or whatever I knew was going to be coming up. And I'm a huge believer in gratitude, slowing down, thinking about, this is my thinking deeply part. I do write, I journal, I've journaled my whole life, and I write gratitudes every single day. It forces me to let go of all of the things that I can't control and the things that we seem to think are so important in our everyday lives that really in the big scheme of things aren't. And to be grateful for what's right in front of me and to be really present in what I'm doing so that I'm the best mom, I'm the best wife, I'm the best teacher that I can be. Those are, I think if I could sum up my 3 best personal habits, it would be being organized, keeping good boundaries, and writing my gratitudes.
Love it. Love it. All right, Jennifer, it's time for your quick picks. And here we want to know the education voices and resources that are shaping your practice and inspiring your thinking today. So starting at Twitter, tell us about someone we should follow there and share why they've been inspiring you lately.
You should follow Lisa Highfill at Highfill. She is the creator of the Hyperdocs. She is a really big thinker and just the nicest person that you would ever want to meet. So when she tweets, she's constantly sharing and resharing other people's great ideas. And also she's super humble, but she will share a lot of her work that she's doing with Hyperdocs. So everybody should follow Lisa.
All right. And Lisa, if you are listening, I apologize for my brutal misrepresentation of Hyperdocs.
Oh, no.
I'm getting a good education here from Jennifer. So yes, Lisa Highfill. Okay. I'll make sure I am following her. Point us to an edtech tool that you currently love using in your classroom or professional practice. We've mentioned a few of them. Is there one that you'd like to single out?
I really would love to single out Wakelet. I think Wakelet has been, it's another one of those tools that is free, first of all, and it is a platform that helps people. It wasn't actually designed for educators, but it is becoming popular in the educational community because it helps people curate resources and share things. And, you'd mentioned Google Classroom, and it has great access to Google Drive. It's super easy, and my kids are using it. I use it to create and share things online, and I just think Wakelet is a super neat application that is very responsive to the needs of educators.
Recommend one book, one that you've been reading lately, or one of your all-time faves, and tell us why you recommend it.
That is not fair. One book, come on. I read a book a week at least.
Oh my goodness.
Let's see, a book so this year, one of my focuses for teacher training and professional development at my school was to help teachers learn about inquiry and how you can bring inquiry practice into your classroom. So I would have to say that the Inquiry Mindset by Trevor MacKenzie and Rebecca Bathurst-Hunt. It's Trevor's second book. He did dive into inquiry first and then Inquiry Mindset. And they're just really great. He's a teacher. He knows what he's talking about in terms of getting kids to learn with a way of approaching their education with curiosity and real strong buy-in.
Phenomenal guy and educator, and I've had the privilege of hearing him speak, and I'm enjoying his books as well.
Oh, good. Yeah, he's fantastic.
Are you a podcast listener, Jennifer? If you are, tell us about one other than Teachers on Fire, of course. Tell us about one that you've got in your deck that you're really enjoying, and speaking especially to all those commuters and people who enjoy listening while they work out, what do we need to start subscribing to?
Oh, so hard to pick one. Well, my friend Brian Briggs and Ryan O'Donnell, they have a podcast called Check This Out, and it is really fun to listen to. They are both edtech teachers, TOSAs in their school districts, and Check This Out is part humor, part their awesome personalities. They're super knowledgeable about all things education and current trends, and they share a lot of resources and fun ideas. So it's the kind of podcast you can listen to when you're doing pretty much anything. I bike to school, like I said, so I listen to podcasts every single day there and back. And that's definitely one of my favorites. I've also been listening a lot to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast with Jake Miller. And he's pretty awesome too. So there's just so much great podcasting going on, but those are two that I find myself listening to a lot.
Tell us about a YouTube channel that you're subscribed to and explain why we should check it out as well.
Okay. A YouTube channel I use every single week in my classroom is TED-Ed. And in AVID, we are using TED-Ed to do some inquiry learning with collaboration. I have a TED-Ed that we play every Thursday, and whether it's solving a riddle or learning about the history of cheese or something interesting, what I love so much about it is it's created for kids. They're easy, digestible, 5 or 6 minute videos, and the kids are always engaged. I've yet to find one that they don't like, and they write, they draw, they discuss, they collaborate, and then they go out the door talking about, wow, did you know that cheese has started wars before? Or what, just random things that you wouldn't necessarily be learning about in school. So I would encourage TED-Ed.
Jennifer, this has been phenomenal. For people looking to connect with the Mama Wolfe and learn more with you, what are the best ways for the listeners to follow you?
Well, you mentioned my website, jenniferwolfe.net, and I publish on that regularly. So I'd love to interact with you that way. I'm also on Twitter all the time at Mama Wolfe to 2. That's TO2. That's because I have 2 children, Mama Wolfe 2. That's where
There
it
we
comes
go.
from.
Yeah.
I have a Google site that this would be just for teachers. It's set up for. I share it with my students, with my parents. It's called Mrs. Wolfe's Teaching Adventures. So you can type that into your address bar and it should come up and you can kind of get a glimpse into my classroom. I'm on Instagram at Mama Wolfe to 2. We also have an AVID Instagram, EJH AVID. I'm on Facebook at Jennifer Wolfe and Mama Wolfe, and I'm on Wakelet. So we could collaborate there. You could check out my collections and see what we're thinking about these days.
Well, that's fantastic. If you are listening on your phone, just swipe up and check out the show notes. I should have all of those places and locations online linked for you so you can connect with Jennifer that way. Jennifer, again, thank you so much for sharing your time with the podcast today. You've been very generous to share this much of your day with me and with the audience. It's been a personal thrill to connect with another 8th grade teacher, and I'm definitely inspired. I think my audience will be as well. So thank you so much. Take care, and welcome. Let's talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me today here on the Teachers on Fire podcast. For show notes and links from this episode, visit teachersonfire.net. You can also follow the show at Teachers on Fire on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Medium. And again, please do subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Just before we sign off today, I have some important announcements to share. First of all, I need your help. As a listener of the Teachers on Fire podcast, I'm going to assume you're a fan of edu podcasts in general, and you see the value in this unique medium. If that's you, please contribute to my research on educational podcasting and impacts on professional practice by completing a short survey. The survey should take no longer than 5 to 15 minutes, and of course, I will be glad to share the results of my research once it is completed. You'll find a link to the survey in these show notes. It will also be pinned to the top of my Twitter feed at Teachers on Fire and shared on other social media platforms. Please note that this research window will be limited to a couple of weeks. So if you are hearing this after June 9, 2019, the survey will likely be closed by then and the links to it removed. If you did complete the survey, please let me know by tweeting out a reply on Twitter or any other platform. The survey is anonymous, but your participation will mean the world to me. And with your help, I hope to rethink the way we do professional development as educators. Our next stop is the voice message inbox on Anchor. This week, I heard from @Brian Carr. That's Ryan Carpenter, who left this message.
Good morning, Tim. This is Brian Carpenter, and I just wanted to say that I'm out on my hashtag Fresh Air at 5 and listening to your recent episode with Mr. Jordan. It's curious how I'm leaving a voice message, which takes me back almost, 35 years when voice machines came in and we would leave them for each other at our friends' homes. Listening to the message from Mr. Jordan speaks to my heart because the tension as an educator is that kids matter a whole lot, but we have all this content we got to deliver. It's really important to remember the DATA acronym that he used. And that, you know what, at the end of the day, if the kid isn't healthy and well, it doesn't matter what we've taught them. So just that's my encouragement. Thanks for your work. Your work encourages my heart. Happy day, buddy. Bye-bye.
Thanks for that great message, Brian. I really appreciated that, and it was fun to hear you sort of get that in at the end of your run or morning walks. So good stuff. Look forward to more. Hope to hear from you again. And now it's your turn, my dear listener. If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback in response to anything you've heard on the Teachers on Fire podcast, please consider leaving me a voice message as well. Just look for Teachers on Fire on the Anchor app in your mobile device. The rest is easy, And it's a great way to make podcasting a little more two-directional. So I'm excited to hear from more listeners of the podcast. Next, I'd like to thank all those who encourage and support the podcast on Twitter. At Nicole, that's at NICO1E, recently tweeted, "We have got to stop saying we're so busy. We've got to start being more mindful and look at what good we have done. Celebrate and congratulate the good work your colleagues have done. Celebrate yourself, too." At Kelly Croy is really resonating. So she's referring to an earlier episode with my guest, Kelly Croy, the Wired educator. Thank you for that, Nicole. At Hans Appel 094 tweeted, "Great leaders talk less and listen more. They criticize less and praise more, and they reject less and empower more." Superintendent Jordan, that's at SUPT_Jordan, dropping fire on Teachers on Fire with Mr. KV. Hashtag award-winning culture. Thank you for that, Hans. And Hans runs a podcast led by students, directed by students, and it's called Award-Winning Culture, and they feature some amazing guests, fantastic empowerment of young people, and authentic learning and products happening there. So check out Award-Winning Culture. And finally, at Sherelle Martin, that's at SHARELL_Martin, tweeted, "Teachers on fire, I'm hashtag on fire to inspire." I love that, Sherelle. Hey, to the three of you, thank you so much for the encouragement. Nicole, Hans, and Sherelle, you guys are fuel to my fire. I will also invite you to check out the new Teachers on Fire magazine on Medium. I'm calling it new, but we did launch in January, so it's not as new as it was a few months ago, but still going strong and building actually all the time. This week we featured 3 new articles. The first, A Call to Dream by Justin Belt. The second, Is It Too Much or Too Little When It Comes to School Initiatives by Andrew Julian. The third, Teachers Are Professionals by Caitlin Giordano. The Teachers on Fire magazine is a Medium publication, and if you're not familiar with Medium, you'll find it on medium.com or on the Medium app. If you're already an education blogger, consider joining our growing writing team there. You can continue to publish content on your own blog, and you keep full credit and ownership of your content on Medium. Message me at Teachers on Fire on any social media platform for more details. Again, I'm your host, Tim Cavey, and I'm so grateful that you decided to spend some of your day listening to this podcast. I hope that the content you heard today helps to shape your thinking and inspires your practice. And I'll meet you next week right here on the Teachers on Fire podcast.
Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.